everyone, and welcome back to Coffee and Crimes with Maggie May. I'm so excited you all are here, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you can stay up to date with all of my latest episodes. I have some very exciting news. As I mentioned in last week's episode, I am officially sponsored by Debbie Energy. They have so many great products and merchandise. I just love them so much. Debbie Energy gives you the clean energy without the crash, helps boost your focus and mental clarity. There's zero sugar and no artificial colors, along with over 15 flavors to choose from. This product is built for anyone and everyone as well, so that you can conquer those energy-sucking tasks that you have been putting off. Along with the sponsorships comes a discount code that I will be providing to all of you so that you can enjoy this product at a discounted price. My discount code is all caps CCW Maggie May, and I will also list it in the description box with the episode as well so that you can use it when you're ready for that boost of energy. Today's episode is going to be a bit different from what I've been doing. The Epstein files really started to take a toll on me mentally, and I decided to take a step back from it for a bit and kind of focus on my mental health and healing before diving back into the files. Today, however, we are going to be talking about Richard Ramirez. Now, for any of you who don't know, Richard Ramirez is one of the most well-known serial killers from the 80s in not only California, but the US. His crimes were extremely heinous and violent, and I will be going into extreme detail on those crimes, so viewers and listeners' discretion is advised. Now, with all of that being said, let's dive into the life and crimes of Richard Ramirez. Ricardo Munoz Ramirez, or commonly known as Richard Ramirez, was born on February 29, 1960, to Mercedes Munoz and Julian Ramirez in El Paso, Texas. He was the youngest of 5 children, and his mom was a stay-at-home mom raising 5 kids, and his dad was a laborer for the railroad. Julian was very prone to anger and had a terrible drinking problem, which caused him to be extremely violent and abusive towards everyone in the home, but Richard received a lot of that rage. The abuse took a huge toll on Richard, which resulted in him masking the pain and confusion with some extremely bad habits like alcohol and marijuana at just age 10. Now, there's a psychiatrist by the name of Mike Stone who describes Ramirez as a made psychopath as opposed to a born psychopath. He says that Ramirez's schizoid personality disorder, which is a chronic mental illness caused by a lifelong pattern of extreme social detachment, restricted emotional expression, and his desire to stay isolated, contributed to his lack of sympathy to the suffering of his victims and his untreatability. Stone also stated that Ramirez was knocked unconscious and almost died on multiple occasions before the age of 6, which resulted in later developed temporal lobe epilepsy and aggressive and hypersexuality. At the age of 12, Ramirez was taken under the wing of his older cousin, Miguel Mike Baez. Mike was a U.S. Army vet who had turned out to be a serial killer and rapist during his time serving in the Vietnam War. Baez often bragged of him committing gruesome war crimes in Vietnam and even shared Polaroid photos with Ramirez showing Vietnamese women that he had raped, murdered, dismembered, or decapitated. Baez also taught Ramirez a lot of military skills, including stealth and kill tactics. Now, around this time, Ramirez was looking for an escape from his father and the abuse, which often resulted in him sleeping in the local cemetery on a bench. But when he was caught by his father would tie him to a crucifix and leave him overnight as punishment. And right around this time, Ramirez had turned 14, and he picked up another extremely detrimental addiction when he started frequently using LSD. And for anybody who doesn't know what LSD is, it's a psychedelic much like acid or mushrooms. And a lot of Baez and Ramirez's bond was built over their use of drugs and alcohol. It was also during this time and under the influence of not only several substances, but the terrible influence of his cousin, that he started showing a real interest in Satanism and the occult. It was also during that time that he started having sexual fantasies with violence, forced bondage, murder, mutilation, and rape. Now, like most teenage boys in Texas, he would take his father's .22 rifle and would go hunt coyotes, birds, and rabbits. After killing these animals, he would then disembowel them and feed their intestines to the family dog. Now, there have been many studies conducted that there is a strong link between animal cruelty and human violence. In fact, abusers of animals are 5 times more likely to commit violent crimes against people. While he was in school, he took a job at the local Holiday Inn and used his master key to break into rooms while patrons were sleeping and rob them. And on one occasion, Ramirez molested 2 children in the elevator at the hotel, but was never reported or prosecuted. He was then later fired when he tried to rape a woman in her motel room and was caught by the victim's husband. The charges were unfortunately dropped when the couple refused to return to Texas to testify. On May 4th, 1975, at age 15, Ramirez witnessed his cousin Mike fatally shoot his second wife Jessie in the face during a domestic argument. Baez was found not guilty by reason of insanity, attributing the shooting to his PTSD from the military. After the shooting, Ramirez became extremely withdrawn, where he eventually dropped out of Jefferson High during his freshman year and moved in with his sister Beth. His sister Beth was married to a man named Roberto, who was an obsessive peeping Tom, and even took Ramirez on walks where they peeped into women's windows. At age 22, Ramirez then moved to California, and this began his addiction to cocaine and led to several burglaries around Los Angeles and San Francisco to support his drug addiction. On April 10th, 1984, Ramirez murdered 9-year-old May Lung in the basement of her apartment building. She was with her 8-year-old little brother looking for a lost dollar bill when Ramirez approached her and told her to follow him to the basement to look for it. Once they were in the basement, Ramirez then beat, strangled, and raped her and stabbed her to death with a switchblade. He then hung her partially naked body from a pipe in the basement with her blouse. Now, May's murder was not connected to Ramirez until 2009, when his DNA matched the DNA that they had found at the crime scene. A few months after May's murder, Ramirez initiated several violent home invasions and had everyone in Los Angeles and San Francisco completely in panic. And the manhunt for Ramirez is listed as one of the largest in California's history. On June 28, 1984, 79-year-old Jenny Van Cow was found murdered in her apartment in Glassell Park, Los Angeles. She had been stabbed repeatedly in the head, neck, and chest, and while she was sleeping, he also cut her throat so deep he nearly decapitated her. Also, before I continue to list the rest of Richard's crimes, I just want you all to know that towards the end of this episode, I'll go more in depth into the detectives' perspectives and just how they were feeling and dealing with all of these crimes. So let's just go ahead and dive back into the crimes themselves, and then we'll talk more about the detectives. On March 17th, 1985, Ramirez attacked 22-year-old Maria Hernandez outside her home in Rosemead. He attempted to shoot her in the head, but the bullet ricocheted off of her keys when she put her arms up to protect herself. She then played dead, and Ramirez moved on to the house where her roommate, 34-year-old Dale Okazaki, was. After hearing the gunshots, Dale hid behind the counter, and Ramirez entered the kitchen and waited for her to raise her head. Now, once he saw the top of her head, he then shot her right in the forehead and killed her instantly with a .22 caliber pistol. An hour after the attack in Rosemead, Ramirez then pulled 30-year-old Veronica Yu out of her car in Monterey Park and shot her twice with the same gun and then fled the scene. She arrived at the hospital where she was pronounced DOA. 2 murders and 1 attempted murder in one day attracted a lot of attention from both the news media and the police. And before he had the name Night Stalker and had not been identified as Richard Ramirez, he was known as the Valley Intruder or the Walk-In Killer. On March 27th, 1985, at around 2 a.m., Ramirez entered a home that he had burglarized a year earlier outside Whittier and killed 64-year-old Vincent Zazzara by shooting him in the head with a shotgun. His wife, 44-year-old Maxine Zazzara, was awakened by the shot, and shortly after, Ramirez started beating and bound her while demanding to know where all of their valuables were. Maxine managed to break free of her restraints while Ramirez was ransacking their home and retrieved a shotgun from under their bed. Now, not knowing that this shotgun was not loaded, she pulled the trigger and completely caught Ramirez off guard. This pissed Ramirez off, and he shot her 3 times and then mutilated her body by carving an inverted cross into her chest and then removed her eyes and put them into a jewelry box. He then attempted to have sex with her body, but was so shaken by her attempting to shoot him that he couldn't achieve an erection. He took the jewelry box containing the eyes, but he left behind a footprint in the flower bed. The officers were able to photograph the footprint, and they were also able to match the shell casings from the Zazzara crime scene to previous crime scenes, and that's when they had determined that there was a serial killer in the area. On May 29th, just 2 weeks after the Zazzara murders, Ramirez drove a stolen car to Monrovia, where he entered the home of Mabel Bell, an 83-year-old woman, and her disabled sister, 81-year-old Florence Lang. Now, after finding a hammer in the kitchen, he beat and bound Florence while she was laying in her bed, and then beat and bound Mabel as well. He then used an electrical cord to shock them both after raping Florence. And then he used Mabel's lipstick to draw a satanic pentagram on her thigh and on the walls of the bedroom as well. 2 days later, both women were found alive, but in a coma and critically injured. Mabel later died in the hospital from her injuries in July, and Florence passed in August. The next day, Ramirez drove the same car to Burbank and snuck into 42-year-old Carol Kyle's home at gunpoint. He bound Carol and her 11-year-old son, where he then searched for valuables. He released Carol to show him where the valuables were and then raped her repeatedly and ordered her not to look at him. He even at one point threatened to cut her eyes out. He then grabbed Carol's 11-year-old son from the closet and bound them together with handcuffs before fleeing the scene. The night of July 2nd, 1985, Ramirez drove another stolen car to Arcadia and at random chose the home of 75-year-old Mary Cannon. After entering her home, he found her asleep and he beat her unconscious with a lamp and then stabbed her multiple times and then continued to stab her even after she was dead with a 10-inch butcher knife he found from her own kitchen. Now, 3 nights later, Ramirez broke into another home in Sierra Madre and beat 16-year-old Whitney Bennett with a tire iron after failing to find a knife. He then choked her with a telephone cord and later stated that he was completely shocked when sparks began to fly and Whitney began to breathe again. He then also reported that he thought it was Jesus Christ saving her life. She suffered many lacerations and ended up with 478 stitches in her scalp, but she survived her attack. On July 7th, 1985, Ramirez burglarized the home of 60-year-old Joyce Nelson. She was sleeping on her couch when she was beat to death by Ramirez stomping on her face repeatedly. The same footprint left outside the Zazzara home matched the footprint left on Joyce's face. He then went to 2 other neighborhoods before returning to Monterey Park, where he chose the home of 63-year-old Sophie Dickman. He assaulted and handcuffed her at gunpoint and attempted to rape her and stole all of her jewelry and told her to swear on Satan that she wasn't hiding anything of value from him. On July 20th, only 2 weeks after the Monterey Park spree, Ramirez purchased a machete before driving a stolen Toyota to Glendale. He chose the home of Layla and Maxon Needing. He burst into their room while they were sleeping and hacked them with the machete and then killed them with shots to the head with a .22 caliber handgun. He then mutilated their bodies with the machete before robbing them. And after fencing all of the items, he proceeded to Sun Valley and broke into the home of 32-year-old Chinarong Kowanon, who he shot in the head with a .22, killing him, and repeatedly raped his 32-year-old wife, Somkid. He restrained their 8-year-old son before dragging Somkid around the house and forcing her to reveal where any of their valuables were. He also demanded that she swear upon Satan that she was not hiding anything from him either. Now, all of the swearing on Satan and the pentagrams displayed at a lot of the crime scenes just really goes to show how incredibly evil this man's soul was, like how incredibly dark he was. And I could not imagine meeting him and just feeling the dark energy that radiated off of him. It's just so incredibly disturbing to know that there are people out there who are truly this evil, and this is all real events, and it's not fabricated or a story for a book or a movie. It's just so disgusting. On August 6, 1985, Ramirez drove to Northridge and broke into 30-year-old Chris Peterson and 27-year-old Virginia Peterson's home. He crept into the bedroom, startling Virginia, where he had then shot her in the face with a .25 semi-automatic handgun. He then moved on to Chris, where he shot him in the neck and attempted to flee. Chris, however, was able to fight back and avoided being hit by 2 more bullets while struggling with Ramirez. Ramirez eventually escaped, and thankfully, the couple survived their injuries. Now, with all of the news coverage with these crimes that the crimes were getting, the media only saw it fit that this vicious criminal be given a name, and this dubbing him the Night Stalker, and he went down in history as the Night Stalker. So just 2 nights after, Ramirez drove a stolen car to Diamond Bar, where he chose the home of 27-year-old Sakina and 35-year-old Elias Abawath. Sometime after 2:30, he entered their home and into their bedroom, where he shot Elias in the head, killing him instantly. He then cuffed and beat Sakina while forcing her to disclose where any valuables were, and then he brutally raped her. He also again forced her to swear on Satan that she wouldn't scream during the attack. The couple's 3-year-old son entered the room, which, could you imagine how terrifying that would be for not only a 3-year-old, but a mother as well, while all of these events are taking place and you're just feeling completely helpless in the situation? It's just so sad, and the trauma that this child probably had to work through was probably so extensive. Ramirez then restrained their son before continuing to rape Sakina. After Ramirez left, Sakina sent her son to the neighbors for help. Ramirez often followed the news coverage pretty closely when it came to his crimes, and that's when he chose to leave LA and go to San Francisco. On August 18th, Ramirez entered the home of 66-year-old Peter Pan and 62-year-old Barbara Pan. He shot Peter in the temple and then beat and sexually assaulted Barbara before shooting her in the head and leaving her for dead. She survived her injuries and later helped bring Ramirez to justice, and Ramirez used Barbara's lipstick to draw a pentagram and the phrase "Jack the Knife" on the bedroom wall. He again left a footprint at the scene that detectives were able to match to a pair of Avia tennis shoes, the same footprint that was found at the other crime scenes. He also puked on the floor and then masturbated, which is so horrifying. Like, how much disrespect can one person have, and the complete disregard for human life? It's just like almost unheard of. On August 24th, 1985, Ramirez traveled 76 miles south of LA to Mission Viejo in a stolen orange Toyota. He arrived to the home of 45-year-old James Ramiro Jr. Everyone in the house was asleep but James's 13-year-old son. He went out to their truck to grab a pillow, but the vehicle was locked. And then he heard a rustling noise but thought it was an animal, so he decided to stay outside and work on his mini bike in the garage. He then heard footsteps, and when he went to see what it was, he noticed Ramirez looking into the bedroom window. He then raced to his parents' bedroom, and Ramirez fled the scene. However, James was able to notice the make, color, and style of the car, as well as a partial print. And since the attack on the Ramiro home fell through, he broke into 30-year-old Bill Carnes' home, where he and his fiancée, Inez Erickson, were sleeping. Bill was awakened when Ramirez cocked his .25, and then he shot Bill 3 times in the head before identifying himself to Inez as the Night Stalker. He then forced her to swear upon Satan while he punched her multiple times and restrained her with neckties from Bill's closet. After stealing what he could find, he then dragged her into another room and raped her. He again made her swear on Satan that there wasn't anything left, and he said, when he was leaving, "Tell them the Night Stalker was here." She was able to untie herself and went to the neighbors for help, and surgeons were able to remove 2 out of the 3 bullets from Bill's head, and he survived. Now, Frank Salerno and Gail Carrillo were the lead detectives in the Ramirez case, and they contacted the manufacturer of the shoes and were able to retrieve the soles. They discovered that in the U.S., only 6 pairs of these shoes existed in size 11.5, and 5 had been shipped to locations in Arizona, and only 1 pair had been shipped to a store in Los Angeles. After that, they determined that the shoes did in fact belong to the perp, and after Joyce Nelson's case, detectives found a dentist business card in a car that had been sitting in an impound lot that was supposed to be tested for touch DNA and prints, but it was never tested, which is so incredibly frustrating. But anyway, so this business card was for a dentist in Chinatown that Ramirez had visited just 5 days before. Detectives were able to retrieve dental x-rays for a Richard Mena, and both the dentist and the detectives knew that he had to be back at some point because he had an infected tooth. So they put an alarm button in the dentist's office for them to push when Richard had gotten there. But the button had malfunctioned or it wasn't wired properly, and the next day, the dentist called Carrillo and asked why no one showed up when they pushed the button. And they just missed him. And when you hear the detectives talk about how hard they were working and the hours that they were working on these cases, I just can't imagine how devastating it was for them to be that close to catching him. But because a button malfunctioned, they lost such an important lead into arresting a very violent man. When ballistics matched the LA crime scene photos to the Pan crime scene photos, San Francisco's Mayor Dianne Feinstein released the information along with the caliber of gun in the press release. Now, naturally, detectives were pissed because they knew the killer was following the news, which this could just tip him off to destroy evidence. And for anyone who knows anything about anything crime related, you know that this information, like the caliber of a gun and the legible footprints, are 2 very great leads. And when that information is disclosed to the public, including the man committing these crimes, it's just so disheartening because now he knows everything that the team working these crimes does. Ramirez then dropped the shoes off of the edge of the Golden Gate Bridge that night, and they were never found. He then headed back to LA, and several victims were able to work with a sketch artist and were able to release a sketch after the attack on the Peterson home. The police also obtained a cast of Ramirez's footprint from the Romero house. The stolen Toyota was found abandoned on August 28th in Koreatown, and the police were able to obtain a print off of the rear view mirror despite Ramirez trying to wipe his prints. A young lady had called the hotline and told the detectives that her father had befriended a guy named Rick that matched the description from the sketch. Now, naturally, the detectives went and talked to this man, where he then told them that he had met Rick and Rick had given him a gun, but he had taken the gun to Tijuana. Detectives and this man flew to Tijuana and recovered the gun and found out that this was the gun that killed Peter Pan. Now, not long after that, they found Armando Rodriguez. Rodriguez had given a bracelet to his girlfriend that matched the description of a bracelet that was stolen during one of the Night Stalker's robberies that he had got from his friend Rick as well. Now, Frank Falzone was a detective that was from San Francisco that was working with Salerno and Carrillo and went to confront Armando and ask him for help in identifying his friend Rick. He asked what his last name was, and of course, Armando refused to work with the cops. And at one point, Rodriguez even went as far as taunting Falzone and said, "Come on, motherfucker, hit me." Frank Falzone then placed him in the car and asked for Rick's last name again. When Rodriguez then refused again, Falzone was so exhausted by such a long year of working on all of these cases, he cocked his fist back, and at that moment, Armando gave up Richard Ramirez. On August 30th, 1985, they released a mugshot that he had from a previous arrest for auto theft. On August 31st, police set up a surveillance van at the Greyhound bus stop where Richard was going to return from Tucson, Arizona from visiting his brother. Ramirez was completely unaware that he had been the lead story on virtually every major newspaper and news program across California. And when Ramirez returned back to Los Angeles and entered the bus station, he immediately made the cops that were dressed like homeless people. What he didn't realize is that they were all undercover waiting for his return. He still ended up panicking and left the bus station, where he entered a liquor store and saw a newspaper with his picture on it. He then jumps onto another bus where he is identified again, and then jumped off of that bus and ran across a 5-lane freeway where he attempted several carjackings. Angela De La Torre was standing by her car when Ramirez tried to jack her car, but her husband Manuel noticed and struck him in the head with a fence post. Now, a group of people recognized him and chased and captured him and beat him until the cops showed up and arrested him. At his first court appearance, he raised his hand with a pentagram on it and yelled, "Hail Satan." Now, it continues to get even more crazier because the Los Angeles Times reported that some jail employees overheard Ramirez planning to shoot the lead prosecutor when he had a gun smuggled into the courtroom, which honestly, how well did you think that this was going to go? There's a metal detector outside the doors and extensive searches before you even enter the courtroom. So that was never going to fly. Now, on September 20th, 1989, Ramirez was convicted of 43 charges, 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 sexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. On November 7th, 1989, he was sentenced to death by gas chamber. Ramirez stated to reporters after the death sentence and said, "Big deal, death was always went with the territory. See you in Disneyland." The trial ended up costing $1.8 million, which at the time made it the most expensive murder trial in the history of California until it was surpassed by O.J. Simpson in 1994. He had several unsuccessful appeal hearings from his conviction date until the time of his death, and Ramirez died on June 7, 2013 due to complications to B-cell lymphoma at the Marin General Hospital in Green Bay, California at age 53. He had also been affected by chronic substance abuse and chronic hepatitis C. Now, his body was never claimed, so it was cremated. And I just want you all to know that there are several documentaries that are out about Richard Ramirez and the Night Stalker, and I highly recommend that you guys go watch them because the one on Netflix is incredibly good. And I watched it probably maybe a year ago, and then when I started digging into this case, then I really started to I watched it several times while doing my research because it gives so much more information, and then it gives also the detective's point of view and kind of how they were feeling throughout all of it. I mean, Carrillo at one point, they had published Carrillo's information as far as his name, his address, how many kids he had, what his wife's name was, the whole nine, to where he ended up sending his wife away with their children until the case was solved and they had caught Ramirez, because he didn't want him showing up to his house. Which, the fact that they published a detective's information in the newspaper that's working on capturing a serial killer is baffling to me. Like, I just don't understand it. But that documentary talks about so much, and there's so much going on in it too, but they also talk about how they think that there's way more victims, but they were never able to link them to Ramirez. But I mean, the death sentence, that like, everybody was satisfied with that. I mean, and then of course, like, in the documentary, there's victims' family members that go in and talk about, like, how they felt during all of it, like how, how devastating it was for them that their grandparents or their parents or whatever had gone through all of this, and like just how it completely changed the dynamic of their family. So I highly recommend you guys go watch those documentaries. They're so good and they're so informative, and it just opens your eyes to how evil people really can be. So, well, that is all I have for you guys today. I appreciate you guys so much, and I appreciate all of the love and support that I get from you guys. It means so much to me. I'm so incredibly grateful that I get to do this. It's been such an awesome journey, and I can't wait to keep going and going through cases with you guys, and just going through all of this has just been such a blast for me. But anyways, I'm going to let you guys go. Don't forget to stay cautious and caffeinated.